back in the bus, there's always something going on. After our last trip, I was messing with the spray head on that toilet. I had to flush it out, and that seemed to work. It was trying to leak. And by the way, those aren't just everyday products. That is a Dometic, and I bought a, just a regular spray head. Like I didn't even find one at Lowe's that looked like it would work, so I ordered one off Amazon. But the thread size and that part where it would join to the hose coupling on the spray head on the toilet, that's not some universal size. The Dometic is something special. So if you want to replace the whole thing, I mean, you gotta take it all apart, the hose off the valve and all that. But anyway, so while I was messing with that, and then I turned the pump on, and to make sure it wasn't leaking after I put it back together. Well, then I came back a couple hours later. I mean, the pump was off for the fresh water, and I got water on the floor coming out from under the bathroom sink. So I get under here, and I had this problem once before, but I had to do the braided line thing with the waterfall faucet and my adapters to handle that. Well, anyway, I had this happen a year ago where the crimp above the fitting, that it was leaking there, and so I had to replace this a year ago for the exact same problem, and that's where it was leaking. So I take the faucet off and get one of those. I had to get them ordered, got them off Amazon. But you screw it in there and then tighten it up. But it's all good. One thing you got to watch is that these braided lines, if they kink, like this one started to kink on the loop here, and then I noticed that was affecting the water pressure. So something to be aware of when you're working with this stuff, I guess. Anyway, it's fixed. It's not leaking anymore. So not a problem solved there. So while I'm doing quick updates on the bus, we had it down for service last week. Needed to get the fuel filters, the rack core filters, all that replaced. That's something I mess with, so I just had my guys do it. But I also wanted to have them check the generator again, because you guys, if you've seen some of my videos, you've seen me call out for a little while how the generator is spitting oil out the breather tube, and it accumulates on the tray under the generator, and then it drips off everywhere I go. Okay, so it's like, now wait a minute, what's going on here? At first we thought it was because it was overfilled with oil, and it was. Somebody had put too much in there, so we drained that out and put the proper amount. And the thing is, after all that time, you would think when you check the dipstick, for one, you'd think the oil's going to start getting dark, and it never did. And then you would think it was spitting and breathing out of there somehow, that the level on the dipstick would start coming down, and it never did. It was always topped out, maxed out. So anyway, we brought this up, and they're like, you know what? Right away, stop right there. It sounds like you might be getting some diesel in your crankcase with the oil. So they did some tests on the injector pump and determined that's what's happening. So they're going to have to, we'll have to take it back after our next camping trip at the end of June. Actually, it's this coming weekend. So we'll have to take it back down there. They're going to have to pull the pump off. And there's a place in Fort Smith. There's a pump shop there that they'll do the overhaul on it. But hopefully that resolves that, and it isn't something further. But it's always something. I'd be glad to get that fixed. For a long time, it's like something just didn't feel right about it, and I really don't know enough about that stuff to have been suspicious of that. But they also did a little quick test. They call it the paper test, where you can take a sample of the oil and you can kind of tell if there's a mixture apparently. And so they're like, yeah, that's absolutely what's going on. So right now we think that's where it's coming through. Get that fixed. If it's still a problem, then of course you have to go to look at pistons and rings and see if it's coming through another way as well. But hopefully that's not the case. Anyway, looking forward to the next camping trip here. It's only a couple hours away, and so we'll only run the generator a couple hours there, a couple hours back, and a little light duty, and hopefully we haven't done any damage in other ways with it. But there you go. Well, one of the last updates, or another update that I've got on the bus, is the gauge for the oil temperature on the main engine. This guy here. So we had that replaced. We also had the water one replaced last year. But, it turned out it would just always climb to the max setting, So we tried to replace what we thought was the oil sending unit. It turns out it is the oil sending unit. It's on the oil filter housing up under there, back there, and but it still didn't work. It still would, just raise temperature all the way to 320. So in the service center, they got a hold of whoever, with Detroit and different places, and I think what they've pretty much determined is that it may not have had an oil. The engine probably didn't have the normal oil temperature sensor, but I mean, obviously it's here on the dash. The Bluebird had this from the beginning, but Detroit made it sound like a sensor located maybe where it was on the oil filter housing was kind of non-standard. So I don't know. It's one of those things with who knows. But I guess the thought now is that it doesn't work because it doesn't have the right resistance. So the sensor back there doesn't match up to this gauge, which is a V3 gauge, VEE3 gauge. And so, yeah, we've kind of started asking some questions to find out if anybody knows. I mean, is there a V3 oil temp sensor that we should be using that's different than what we got? And or do we need to find a match set? So, all right, we'll see what we find. But kind of like to have all my gauges working, so that one's just a little pet peeve right now. But anyway, that's it. Oh yeah, the other thing was, the reason we got the fuel filters changed. It's been 2 years, and we don't really put a lot of miles on this, but I guess we put about 2,000 since well, I don't know, maybe that was just since last summer, but on the rack core gauge for the main engine, this guy was deep in the yellow, headed to red while we were driving highway speeds. So I was like, that was why we finally got that changed. So I guess that's indicating kind of where it was, which when I looked at it when I was driving it home from the service after getting the filters all replaced, that was about where it was. So we're back in there, added some additive because we topped off the fuel as well, $800 later. So we're ready for the rest of the season here this summer through September, I think. And with any luck, we won't have any other issues. Of course, the other project out there is the vintage camper for my stepdaughter, Jess. But yeah, I think once we get the other thing I mentioned on the video, the generator injection pump addressed, hopefully that's it. More to come. It's always something.